Imagine stepping up to a microphone in this, cavernous convention hall.
Oh, yeah. It's intimidating.
Right. The air conditioning is humming, the fluorescent lights are buzzing, and there's 1,000 people sitting behind you.
And you're staring down that digital countdown clock. You
Yeah.
get exactly 2 minutes.
2 minutes, that's it. And, the words you're about to say there, they don't just change a paragraph in a 100-page workbook.
No, absolutely not.
They could actually determine whether a struggling rural parish, 500 miles away gets a pastor or just has to close its doors forever.
It is an incredibly high-stakes environment, but the thing is, it's disguised as very dry parliamentary procedure.
Exactly. Welcome to the floor of the 2026 Lutheran Church Missouri Synod Convention.
Yeah, if you don't understand the mechanisms underneath all those documents, it is just, well, it's very easy to get lost in the noise.
And that is exactly why we're here. We know who you are listening right now. You're serving as a delegate.
A massive responsibility.
It really is. And you've specifically asked us to help you prepare for Floor Committee 6, which handles Pastoral Ministry and Seminaries.
Right. So our mission on this deep dive is basically to act as your strategic briefers.
Yep. We're pulling from today's business, Issue 1, the Convention Workbook, and that really detailed Committee 6 Amendment Guide you uploaded for us.
It's quite a stack of sources, honestly, but, the work couldn't be more vital.
For sure. Committee 6 is essentially the engine room of the Synod.
Yeah. If you want to know what a church body is going to look like, or, sound like in 30 years, you don't look at their marketing.
Wow.
You look at how they are forming, funding, and overseeing their pastors today.
Okay, so we need an analytical lens for this. Because if you're standing at that microphone, you can't just react to the emotion of the moment.
Right. You need a framework to actually analyze the underlying structure of what's being proposed.
And the framework our sources provide for this is something they call kingdom over castle.
Yes. The kingdom versus castle paradigm.
Which is such a good concept.
It is. When you are navigating any kind of institutional bureaucracy, this is like an indispensable diagnostic tool.
So let me test an analogy on you to see if I'm grasping this correctly.
Sort.
To me, castle thinking feels like a homeowners association that has entirely lost the plot.
Oh, I know those HOAs.
Right. Like, they care more about the exact millimeter-specific height of your fence or the shade of beige on your siding than they do about whether the family living inside is actually thriving.
The rules just become the point.
Exactly. But kingdom thinking cares about the family. It wants the neighborhood to be safe, sure, but the ultimate goal is the life happening inside, not just preserving the HOA's absolute authority.
That's a helpful starting point. But let me complicate that analogy just a bit for this context.
Okay, complicated.
Because in the church, we aren't just talking about property values, right? We're talking about eternal stakes.
Obviously a bigger deal.
So imagine an HOA where the board members genuinely deeply believe that if they don't control every single millimeter of that fence, the neighborhood won't just look messy, it will be spiritually compromised.
Oh, wow. Okay, I see that.
That is why castle thinking is so seductive here. It usually doesn't come from malice.
It comes from a protective instinct.
Exactly. But the risk is that the protective instinct kind of metastasizes into this unnecessary, centralized control.
Right. It's the anxiety that if we don't tightly control it, we somehow lose the truth.
Precisely. And in the context of Committee 6, castle thinking shows up as vague processes where no one is quite sure who's actually in charge.
Or like weak reporting mechanisms, right?
Right.
Where nothing is ever measured.
Yeah, and this is perhaps the most common in pastoral formation, it shows up as maintaining incredibly high standards while providing zero practical access to actually achieve them.
Like building a beautiful theological moat, but pulling up the drawbridge.
Protecting the institution at the expense of the mission.
So what's the alternative? How does the kingdom ideal work?
The kingdom ideal operates on a totally different principle. It's low control, but high accountability.
Okay, break that down for me.
Right.
What does low control actually look like in a massive church body?
Well, low control means you trust the local actors. You trust the districts, the seminaries, the congregations.
You let them handle things in their specific context.
Right. You don't micromanage how they do it from a central office in St. Louis.
Okay, but what about the accountability part?
That's the crucial other half. You demand high accountability, you require public reports, you set hard deadlines.
So you measure outcomes based on confessional fidelity and mission effectiveness.
Exactly. In a kingdom paradigm, the synod exists to serve the congregations and the gospel witness, not the other way around.
Low control, high accountability. I really want you to write that on the inside of your convention workbook right now.
It's the perfect filter.
And to measure that accountability, our source guide introduces another super practical tool, the 5 capitals.
Yes. Every time a delegate reads a resolution, they should ask, does this release capital or does it downcastle?
Let's walk through these 5 capitals because, we're going to use them to dissect every single resolution today.
Sure. So the first and really the most foundational is spiritual capital.
Right.
In this context, we're talking about word and sacrament, absolution, pastoral care, prayer, and robust theological formation. It's the absolute lifeblood of the church.
So if a resolution somehow hinders a pastor's ability to actually preach the gospel or care for the sick, it's draining spiritual capital.
Absolutely. The second one is relational capital. This is trust.
And in a sprawling institution, trust is a highly volatile currency, isn't it?
Oh, completely. We are talking about trust between the seminaries and the district presidents or local congregations and their pastors.
So if you pass a bylaw that inherently treats local leaders with suspicion, you burn relational capital.
Exactly. Now, the third is physical capital. These are the tangible brick-and-mortar realities.
Like the seminary campuses in St. Louis and Fort Wayne.
Right. Or the church buildings, the parsonages, the mission plans in a dense urban center, or out in a remote farming community.
So a resolution that demands a new program but totally ignores the physical reality of where people live, that's a problem.
Deeply problematic. Fourth is intellectual capital. This is the deep well.
Holy Scripture, the Lutheran confessions.
The original languages of Greek and Hebrew. Pure doctrine, pastoral wisdom, and actual boots-on-the-ground mission competence.
We want to protect this fiercely, right?
We do, but we have to make sure protecting it doesn't mean locking it away in a vault where nobody can access it.
And finally, financial capital. The spreadsheets.
Yep. Tuition costs, pastoral compensation, scholarships, worker support, and transparent stewardship.
Because you simply cannot mandate a brand new educational requirement without asking the most basic mechanical question. Who is paying for this?
Right. Here is a mandate for your parish. Good luck paying the electric bill. It doesn't work.
So with that kingdom versus castle lens and those 5 capitals, let's just open up the workbook.
Let's start with the core of how a pastor is made. The gold standard pipeline. Residential formation.
Okay, this is Resolution 604. In today's business, Issue 1, the title is, To support residential Master of Divinity and alternate route pastoral formation for the sake of the flock.
Sounds pretty comprehensive.
Let me plainly summarize this for you. This resolution is basically a really strong statement of support for the traditional residential Master of Divinity programs, as well as the alternate route programs at the seminaries.
It affirms that bringing men to campus is absolutely necessary, right?
Right, and it asks the church for adequate funding to make it happen.
Well, the pastoral formation and mission opportunity here is undeniable. There's a reason this is the gold standard.
Because you're fully immersing them.
Exactly. When you uproot a man and place him on a seminary campus for 3 or 4 years, you are immersing him in the languages, the confessions, the daily chapel.
There's an immense amount of intellectual and spiritual capital built in that crucible.
It's a beautiful thing.
Okay, but applying our lens, where is the castle risk? Because on the surface, supporting seminary sounds pretty bulletproof.
The risk isn't in what the resolution says. It's in what it ignores.
What do you mean?
A passionate defense of residential formation can very easily become an exercise in institutional denial if it doesn't reckon with modern realities.
Oh, I see. Like the economic reality.
Right. Think about a 35-year-old second career man with a wife and 3 kids. What's his situation?
Well, he probably has a mortgage.
Yeah.
He has a career he'd have to walk away from.
Yep.
And the cost of uprooting that family from, say, Texas and moving them to Missouri or Indiana, it's astronomical.
Exactly. We are talking about the exorbitant cost of higher education, the housing crisis, the loss of a spouse's income.
And some places, like underserved ethnic or rural contexts, leaving just isn't an option at all.
If you build the walls of the castle so high that only a wealthy or highly subsidized few can afford to scale them, you might be keeping the doctrine pure, but you're starving the parishes.
Parishes that desperately need pastors. It's high standards without access.
That is classic castle thinking disguised as theological rigor.
I totally see it. It's easy to vote yes on a resolution that says residential formation is great and walk away feeling good.
While totally ignoring the guy who literally cannot afford the gas for a moving truck.
So the uploaded guide suggests an amendment here. It says we need to explicitly inject these real-world barriers into the text.
And it suggests a really specific mechanism to do that. It's not just complaining about the cost.
It's demanding a report to the 2029 convention on how access is actively being improved.
This forces the theological ideal to actually reckon with the economic reality.
Let's give you the actual tool here. Let's say I'm standing at the mic. How do I actually phrase this so I don't get ruled out of order by the chairman?
So, you step to the microphone, state your name and your voting district, and you say, Mr. Chairman, I move to amend Res. 604 by adding a resolve that states, resolved that the Synod encourage seminaries and districts to identify and address financial and geographic barriers to residential formation, reporting to the 2029 Convention on actionable steps taken to improve access without reducing formation standards.
Without reducing formation standards. That's a great little clause.
It's essential. It prevents anyone from claiming this is some attack on theological rigor.
Exactly. And look at the mechanics of this amendment. This is the perfect embodiment of low control, high accountability.
Because it does not micromanage how the seminaries are supposed to fix the tuition problem.
Right. It doesn't tell them to build cheaper apartments. That's the low control part.
You trust the seminary presidents to figure out the logistics, but it demands a public report on actionable steps by a specific date.
High accountability. And tracing our capitals, this amendment directly releases financial capital by forcing a public conversation about costs.
And physical capital, too, by acknowledging the immense geographic and housing hurdles.
So if you're in a delegation huddle on the floor, whispering with your fellow delegates before the vote, the question you should ask them is this: does this amendment protect our rigorous standards while actually helping the candidates who can't afford to uproot their families?
That brings it right down to earth.
It really does. Let's look at another piece of the pipeline puzzle. We can't form pastors if we don't have men stepping up to be formed in the first place.
Very true. Which brings us to Resolution 611.
Right. To embed church work formation and recruitment in the culture of the LCMS.
Plain summary here. We have a massive worker shortage.
And this aims to make recruiting pastors and teachers something that is baked into the everyday culture of the Synod.
The mission opportunity is existential. Cultivating the next generation of church workers is literally the future of the physical and spiritual capital of the church.
Because if we don't have pastors, we don't have word and sacrament ministry.
Exactly. So what's the castle risk here?
Well, let me take a stab at this based on our framework. The risk is that the Synod office decides they're going to solve this by forming a giant centralized committee.
Sure.
They hire a marketing firm, print a bunch of glossy posters, launch an expensive PR program, and leave the actual local congregational volunteers completely out of the loop.
You are tracking exactly with the risk profile. Centralized, bureaucratic programs for recruitment almost always fail.
Why do you think that is?
Because a high school junior doesn't decide to dedicate his life to the pastoral office because he saw a glossy poster from the International Center.
Right. It happens in the pews.
It happens when a faithful Sunday school teacher notices a young man's aptitude for scripture and pulls him aside. Or around the dinner table when parents talk to their kids about church work.
So if the resolution relies on a centralized committee, it's draining relational capital. It's bypassing the local trust networks.
Exactly. So the amendment suggested in your guide focuses entirely on empowering those local actors.
It pushes the center of gravity away from headquarters and down to the grassroots.
Yes. Let's give them the improved amendment language for the microphone.
Okay, it would be resolved that the Synod provide actionable, low-cost resources directly to congregational volunteers and parents to foster recruitment at the local level.
Low control, high accountability again. It trusts the parents, the local pastors, and lay leaders rather than defaulting to a committee.
It unlocks relational capital and builds spiritual capital right where it matters most.
Your chairman-ready phrase is, Mr. Chairman, I move to amend Res. 611 to explicitly direct recruitment resources to local congregational volunteers and parents.
And when you huddle with your group, you ask, is recruitment a Synod office program or is it a local church culture?
Now, before we move into the alternative pathways, there are two resolutions here that we shouldn't gloss over.
Even though they might not need heavy amending, right?
Right. Resolutions 601 and 602.
So 601 is about upholding a deep and broad study of Holy Scripture and the Book of Concord in the seminaries.
And 602 is about encouraging specialized witness and outreach training.
These are foundational. We talked about intellectual and spiritual capital, and 601 is the bedrock of that.
Why is studying Greek and Hebrew still critical in 2026? Because the church must always be able to engage the actual text of God's word, not just translations.
To defend pure doctrine.
Yes. And 602 recognizes that while the theology never changes, the mission context does.
Like a pastor deploying to a dense, secular urban center might need specialized outreach training that a rural pastor might not.
Exactly. And from our sources, it looks like these two resolutions are pretty solid as written.
Yeah, they're solid kingdom-building resolutions, affirming the core work.
Unless a delegate spots a highly specific wording issue that creates a loophole, these likely do not need major amendments.
Okay, so that establishes the traditional residential highway. You go to campus, you study the languages, get your M.Div, get called.
But what happens when that highway simply cannot reach the destination?
Right. What happens to the isolated farming community in North Dakota that hasn't had a full-time pastor in a decade?
Or the first-generation immigrant church plant in an inner city where the leader doesn't speak English as a first language.
They certainly can't move to Missouri for 4 years.
That existential crisis is exactly what birthed the specific ministry pastor program, the SMP program.
If the residential M.Div is the board-certified surgeon, the SMP is the vital field medic.
I love that analogy. Field medics save lives in environments where surgeons simply cannot operate.
And the SMP program allows men to be ordained and serve in highly specific, localized contexts while getting their theological education via distance learning and intensives.
But just like in medicine, if you have a field medic operating out on the front lines, you need incredibly intense oversight.
You need a clear chain of command and support.
Which brings us to Resolution 609, to implore Council of Presidents to fulfill 2019 Resolution 603A re-oversight of specific ministry pastors.
Just for anyone who might not be deep into the polity, the Council of Presidents, or the COP, is made up of the 35 regional district presidents, plus the synodical president.
They are the bishops, effectively. They handle the ecclesiastical supervision.
And this resolution is essentially begging them to actually do what a convention told them to do 7 years ago regarding overseeing these SMPs.
The mission opportunity here is doctrinal fidelity and robust pastoral support.
Because these SMPs are often serving in highly isolated, incredibly challenging contexts.
They need oversight not just as a disciplinary measure, but for their own survival, their pastoral care, and continued formation.
Okay, I have to stop here. I'm looking at the language of this resolution. To implore the Council of Presidents.
Yeah.
I mean, imploring. That sounds like such a weak suggestion.
Yeah.
Hey guys, if you have some free time, could you maybe write some guidelines?
That has to be a massive castle risk.
It really is. It is the absolute height of weak governance.
Imploring without a timeline or a specific deliverable leads to exactly what has apparently happened since 2019.
Nothing verifiable. It creates vague processes.
If you just say the Council of Presidents is responsible, well, if a committee of 35 men is responsible, then nobody is individually responsible.
Without a hard deadline, the work just gets pushed to the bottom of the district president's inbox.
Because they're constantly dealing with immediate burning fires in their districts.
So, weak reporting and unclear responsibility. The Guides Amendment Review says we have to inject a date into this.
A specific date for a publicly available summary. It's the only mechanical way to force action. You don't implore bureaucracy, you give it a deadline.
So here's the improved amendment phrasing to take to the microphone. Resolved that the Council of Presidents produce a publicly available summary of completed SMP oversight guidelines and implementation steps by insert specific date prior to 2029.
This is a textbook application of our kingdom paradigm.
Notice what it does not do.
Right. It does not tell the district presidents what the guidelines must say.
The council retains the authority and the freedom to write guidelines that actually fit their wildly diverse districts. That's low control.
But they must deliver them publicly by a hard deadline. That is high accountability.
This secures intellectual capital by ensuring the doctrine taught remains supervised, and it desperately rebuilds relational capital.
Because right now, if guidelines are vague, trust breaks down. The SMPs feel abandoned, and the Synod feels suspicious.
So in your delegation huddle, the question is simple. Does accountability actually exist without a timeline?
The answer is no.
So you go to the mic and say, Mr. Chairman, I move to amend Res 609 to require a specific date for a public report on completed SMP guidelines.
Now, what about the field medic who wants to become a surgeon?
Oh, like an SMP who wants to transition to the main highway.
Right. Let's say he's been serving faithfully, life circumstances have changed, and he wants to pursue General Pastor Certification, or GPC.
That's Resolution 607, plain summary. We want to encourage these specific ministry pastors to take the additional coursework to become general pastors, eligible to be called anywhere.
The mission opportunity is fantastic. You're upgrading a pastor's theological skills, deepening his intellectual well.
And expanding the pool of general pastors when we have a severe shortage.
But the castle risk is glaringly obvious if you know anything about higher ed.
You're encouraging a guy who is already working full-time, probably struggling financially, to take on massive additional coursework.
And the resolution doesn't clarify the costs, the financial aid, or the realistic pathways to actually get it done.
It's an unfunded mandate disguised as polite encouragement. Here's a bridge, but we're hiding the toll costs.
You cannot build intellectual capital by completely ignoring financial capital. It just creates guilt and frustration.
So to fix this, the guide suggests bringing this improved amendment to the floor. Resolved, that seminaries and districts explicitly communicate the financial aid options and flexible bridge program timelines available to SMPs pursuing GPC.
Once again, low control, high accountability. You're holding the institutions accountable for transparency.
You aren't micromanaging their curriculum or demanding they make the education free.
But you are demanding they put the actual price tag and timeline clearly on the table so these pastors can make informed decisions.
It respects their vocation.
Your chairman phrase here is, Mr. Chairman, I move to amend 607 to require clear communication of financial aid and flexible timelines for SMPs.
And in the huddle you ask, are we building a bridge but hiding the toll cost?
Just to round out the SMP ecosystem, we have resolutions 606 and 608.
606 affirms the parameters of the SMP program. What's the deep dive on this one?
The castle risk here is rigidity. In strictly enforcing the parameters of where an SMP can serve, you might accidentally lock out genuine, urgent local mission needs.
Like a rural congregation loses their pastor, and they have an elder who is perfectly suited to be an SMP for them.
If the parameters are too rigid, they might be told no, and that church dies.
If a delegate feels an amendment is needed here, it should be to ensure flexibility for those edge case rural and ethnic church plants where a residential guy just isn't feasible.
And 608 clarifies the terminology around mentorship in the bylaws.
Why does changing terminology matter so much?
Because words create realities in governance. The risk is that changing terminology from supervisor to mentor can deeply confuse the local oversight structure.
An amendment here should require clear transition guidance from the district.
You want this shift to feel like increased pastoral support, not a sudden compliance raid by the district office.
That makes perfect sense. Relational capital is fragile.
Okay, we've talked about forming pastors, reaching the margins with SMPs, and overseeing them.
But what does this all mean for the people who are actually doing the teaching and the assessing?
The seminary professors and the colloquy committees. Let's pivot to the structural bylaws.
We're looking at Resolution 610 to amend bylaws to address seminary adjunct faculty.
Plain summary is that this amends specific synodical bylaws, 3.11.1 and 3.10.5, to address how seminary adjunct faculty are approved and how their doctrine is reviewed.
The mission opportunity seems straightforward. Seminaries can't have a full-time, tenured professor for every single niche topic.
Right. Sometimes they need specialized instructors, like a medical doctor who is a brilliant expert in bioethics.
Or a seasoned church planter teaching a specific practicum. You want to utilize that intellectual capital while keeping the doctrine taught in the classroom pure.
Absolutely. But whenever you open up the synodical bylaws, you are playing with fire.
Oh boy.
The castle risk here is creating an overly complex parliamentary web that simply bogs down the hiring process.
How does that actually happen? Give me the mechanism.
Let's say the seminary realizes in November that they need someone to teach a specialized counseling course in January.
Okay.
If the new doctrinal review bylaw requires the adjunct to submit paperwork to a committee, which meets quarterly, and then that committee has to forward it to another board for ratification, the semester is over before the adjunct is legally allowed to step into the classroom.
You have over-controlled the situation to the point of suffocating the seminary's ability to actually teach students.
Exactly. So doctrinal purity is weaponized into administrative gridlock.
The Guide's amendment review rightly focuses on the speed and usability of the approval process. You need doctrinal fidelity, no question.
But the process cannot be so labyrinthine that it becomes practically useless.
So the improved amendment is elegant in its simplicity. Resolved, that doctrinal review processes for adjunct faculty be designed to ensure both theological fidelity and timely approval to meet seminary instructional needs.
It demands fidelity, that's the accountability, but it forces the system to allow seminaries to design an efficient workflow.
That's the low control. It protects the intellectual capital without burning the relational capital between administrators and synodical boards.
Your huddle question for your fellow delegates. Does this bylaw protect doctrine, or does it just build administrative red tape?
And when you get to the mic, Mr. Chairman, I move to amend 610 to stipulate that the approval process must allow for timely instructional staffing.
Now we come to what is arguably the most fascinating structural move in this entire committee, Resolution 612, to amend bylaws to reinsert 2007 Pastoral Colloquy bylaws from Policy Manual.
Okay, let's slow down and define the terms for the listener. Colloquy is the process by which a pastor from another Christian denomination, or maybe a man with non-traditional theological training, is rigorously examined and certified to become an ordained LCMS pastor.
Correct. Currently, the detailed rules for how this colloquy process works are housed in a policy manual managed by the Colloquy Committee.
And this resolution wants to take those rules, which haven't been bylaws since 2007, and hardwire them back into the official Synod bylaws.
The stated mission opportunity is standardizing and elevating the visibility of the process.
Okay, explain the mechanism to me. What is the actual difference between a rule living in a policy manual versus living in the Synod bylaws?
It's the difference between clay and concrete.
That's a good way to put it.
If a rule is in a policy manual, the committee oversees it. If there's a massive influx of a specific immigrant population, and we urgently need to colloquize pastors from their background, the committee can meet on a Tuesday, adapt their policies, and implement it on Wednesday.
But if it's a bylaw?
If it is a bylaw, it is constitutionally locked. To change a comma in a bylaw requires a full synodical convention.
Drafting an overture, getting it through a floor committee.
Having 1,000 delegates vote on it, it can take up to 3 years just to tweak a minor procedural rule.
Wow. So moving a policy into a bylaw trades all missional flexibility for absolute rigidity.
It is the ultimate castle move.
It takes operational boots-on-the-ground policies and elevates them to the level of constitutional law. Why would anyone want to do that?
Because of the anxiety we talked about at the beginning, the HOA mindset.
There is a deep psychological comfort in having everything hardwired into the bylaws because it feels safer.
It feels like you are protecting intellectual capital, but in reality, you are freezing it in carbonite.
The guide actually points out that this might be a place for a strategic question rather than a direct amendment.
I love this tactic.
Sometimes asking a piercing question on the floor, getting it on the public record, is more effective than clumsily trying to rewrite a massive bylaw resolution on the fly.
It forces the floor committee to defend their logic in front of 1,000 delegates.
So you could step to the mic and ask, Mr. Chairman, does moving these policies into the bylaws restrict our ability to adapt the colloquy process to urgent, fast-changing mission contexts?
It is a brilliant question. If you do feel compelled to offer an amendment, you might propose referring this entire resolution to the Commission on Handbook for further study.
Or adding a resolve that explicitly protects the committee's agility. Resolved, that the Colloquy Committee retain documented flexibility in evaluating non-traditional pastoral experience.
You want to ensure the committee has the freedom to act contextually while maintaining those strict confessional standards.
We want to protect intellectual and spiritual capital, but not put them in a museum display case where they can't be touched.
Speaking of protecting things, briefly, Resolution 605 just reaffirms the certification process.
Yes, it's a baseline resolution securing intellectual capital. As the guide notes, it likely doesn't need amending unless delegates want to clarify specific metrics.
It's doing exactly what it should do.
Okay, we have built the pipeline, we have mapped the off-road SMP routes, and we have examined the structural rules for the teachers and the colloquy committees.
But now we arrive at Section 4, and honestly, this might be the most critical part of this entire deep dive.
Because it deals with the raw human reality of ministry, the laborer and his wages.
This is where theology meets the spreadsheet. We've talked endlessly about how to make pastors, how to oversee them, how to test them.
But how do we take care of them? How do we ensure they and their families survive the incredible rigors of this vocation?
We are looking at Resolution 613 to assert that the Lord has ordained that those who preach the gospel should make their living from the gospel.
Based directly on 1 Corinthians 9.14. The plain summary is that it reaffirms this biblical mandate, urges congregations to review their pastoral compensation, and directs synod entities to provide resources on financial wellness.
The mission opportunity here is profound. We are talking about retaining pastors in the ministry.
Reducing the crippling, silent family stress that destroys marriages and ministries behind the doors of the parsonage.
It's about actually honoring the workers of the gospel.
But applying the lens, the council risk here feels very subtle and incredibly dangerous. Because who is going to vote against 1 Corinthians 9?
Exactly. The castle risk here is dispensing guilt without offering solutions.
Unpack the mechanics of that. How does a resolution become guilt?
Imagine a legacy congregation in a declining rural town, or an inner-city parish in a rapidly gentrifying neighborhood where their members have been priced out.
They have 35 people in the pews on Sunday.
They love their pastor. They are giving sacrificially. But the math simply does not work.
They physically cannot generate the $75,000 salary, plus the massive health insurance premiums, plus retirement.
Right. The financial capital just does not exist in that room.
If the Synod, acting as a massive centralized body, passes a resolution that essentially just points a finger and says, pay your pastor more, the Bible demands it, without acknowledging the economic reality of that parish.
You are just heaping guilt on a struggling flock. You are telling them to do something they mathematically cannot do.
And worse, you are doing it without offering structural help, or even acknowledging the growing reality of bivocational ministry, where the pastor has to work a secular job to survive.
Wow. That is heavy.
It's very easy to stand at a convention hall and pass a resolution affirming a Bible verse. It's much harder to deal with the actual spreadsheets of a struggling parish.
The Guides Amendment Review says we have to push toward addressing sustainability before it becomes a full-blown crisis.
We have to release financial, physical, and spiritual capital here simultaneously.
Because let's be honest, a financially panicked pastor who doesn't know how he's going to buy groceries or pay for his kids' braces simply cannot provide optimal spiritual care to his flock.
So here is the improved amendment to bring to the floor for 613. And if you take nothing else away from this deep dive, write this one down.
Resolved, that districts be encouraged to support and train lay leaders to assist in congregations where pastoral financial realities require the pastor to seek additional employment, and that the Synod explore establishing a fund for struggling parishes.
Look at how that changes the entire tenor of the resolution. It moves it from a guilt trip to a structural, kingdom-minded approach.
It acknowledges reality. It provides low-control districts have the freedom to address their unique economic contexts.
And train lay leaders to step up. But it provides high accountability by holding the broader church accountable to the well-being of the worker.
It says, we see you, the math is hard, and we are going to explore structural ways to help, not just tell you to try harder.
The chairman phrase for this one is, Mr. Chairman, I move to amend Res. 613 to include practical district support for congregations navigating bivocational pastoral needs.
And the huddle question for your delegation is a real gut check. Does this help congregations thank pastors in practice or just in words?
Which pairs perfectly with the final resolution we need to cover, 603. This is a beautiful resolution of thanksgiving to God for the office of the Holy Ministry and gratitude for the pastors serving across the Synod.
Thanksgiving is essential spiritual and relational capital. It's a great resolution.
And what you're saying is, it anchors the harsh, practical financial realities of 613 in a posture of genuine gratitude.
We don't solve the financial crisis out of anger. We solve it because we are thankful for these men.
Okay, take a breath. We have traversed the theology, the governance, the pipelines, and the pastoral care. We understand the mechanisms of the text.
Now it is time to open up the delegate toolkit. This is about strategy and execution on the convention floor.
You are sitting in the hall, you have your voting device, your amendment guide, and the microphone is right there. How do you actually use this information?
Let's start with a bit of administrative cleanup. Resolution 614 is basically a giant sweeping broom.
To respectfully decline overtures. Let's define overtures for the listener who might be a first-time delegate.
An overture is a formal proposal or request sent in by a local congregation or a district prior to the convention. Hundreds of them pour in.
And the floor committees sift through them. Resolution 614 lists all the overtures that Committee 6 decided were either redundant, outside their scope, or unnecessary to act upon.
So it's a procedural vote. It's mostly straightforward.
Unless, and this is a big, unless you as a delegate realize that an overture your home congregation submitted got swept into this dustpan.
If you want to rescue a specific declined overture to have it debated on the floor, you have to move to amend 614 by striking that specific overture from the declined list.
But generally speaking, it's routine administrative housekeeping.
Now let's look at the ranked amendments to consider. A convention is exhausting. You only have so much political and physical capital as a delegate.
Where should you focus your energy? Based on our deep dive, where are the highest priorities?
The absolute highest priorities, where you should spend your capital, are 604 and 613.
Right, 604 is a residential formation access, making sure we don't build the theological castle wall so high that guys can't get in because of the crushing cost.
And 613 is the pastoral compensation reality. Moving the Synod from simply saying pay them more to actually exploring funds and bivocational support for struggling parishes.
Those two resolutions impact the lived daily reality of the church more than anything else.
The next tier, the high priority amendments, are 609, which is demanding a strict timeline for S&P oversight guidelines, 607, which demands transparent communication on financial costs for S&Ps pursuing general certification, and 610, which ensures the doctrinal review for adjunct faculty doesn't create administrative gridlock.
And what about the amendments that are likely unnecessary? We touched on these. 601 on scripture study, 602 on outreach training, 603 on thanksgiving, and 605 reaffirming certification.
Let me just speak directly to the delegate here. Please, I am begging you, do not be the guy who steps to the microphone to amend a thank you resolution just to hear yourself speak.
Yes, please. The convention has limited time. Every minute you spend wordsmithing a sentence about Thanksgiving is a minute stolen from debating how to keep a rural parish alive.
Spend your capital where it matters.
That is excellent advice. Now, here is something incredibly useful from the guide. I want to give the delegates a reusable master amendment paragraph.
Think of this as a parliamentary multi-tool. It's a phrasing that delegates can adapt and apply to almost any bureaucratic resolution to instantly inject a kingdom over castle mindset.
Oh, this is gold. If you're listening, grab a pen.
If a resolution looks too centralized, or if the process seems vague, you step to the mic and move to add this resolve. Resolved, that the implementation of this resolution shall be designed to maximize local congregational flexibility, prioritize direct gospel witness, and require a publicly accessible report of outcomes and expenditures to the next Synod convention.
I love how that just slices right through the bureaucracy. It is the perfect antidote to castle thinking.
It mandates local flexibility. There's your low control.
Yep.
It focuses on gospel witness that keeps the main thing the main thing.
And it demands a public report of outcomes, and money spent there is your high accountability. You can snap that clause onto the end of almost any programmatic resolution on the floor.
But as we mentioned earlier, sometimes you don't actually need to make a motion to amend. An amendment can be clunky.
Right. It requires a second, debate, a vote. Sometimes a mic question is better than an amendment.
If you just want to get something on the public record or force the committee chairman to clarify their intent so it's recorded in the convention proceedings, you just ask a piercing question.
Can you give us some examples of those questions?
Regarding S&P evaluation, you could simply ask, Mr. Chairman, what specific metrics will be used to evaluate the S&P program's effectiveness?
Or for oversight? How are mentoring and supervision practically funded across the varying districts?
Or on the compensation resolution, 613, are there concerns about the financial sustainability of this mandate for our small rural parishes?
Asking a sharp, clarifying question can often shape the debate and the minds of the delegates in the room far more effectively than trying to rewrite a sentence.
Okay, finally, let's go over the cheat sheet for addressing the chairman. The protocol on the floor matters.
If you fumble the parliamentary protocol, you lose the room, and the chairman might rule you out of order. Give us the steps.
Step 1. Draft before speaking. Write out the exact, precise wording of your amendment on a physical piece of paper. Do not wing it. Do not ad-lib.
Right. Step 2. Ensure it is germane. It has to actually relate directly to the resolution currently being debated on the floor.
You cannot amend a resolution about seminary professors to suddenly be about the new hymn book. They will shut your microphone off.
Step 3 is the phrase itself. You address the chair clearly. Mr. Chairman, I move to amend Resolution X by inserting, striking, or replacing the words. And then you read your exact written text.
Do not offer commentary yet. Just read the motion. If you get a second, then you can speak to it.
And step 4 is the internal check. The huddle check with your fellow delegates before you even walk to the microphone.
You look at them and ask, does this release capital or does it build a castle?
That is the ultimate filter. If you apply that filter to everything you do, you will serve the convention, the seminaries, and the church incredibly well.
This has been an incredibly dense, fascinating deep dive into the true mechanics of Committee 6. But as we wrap up, we need to pull back from the parliamentary weeds.
What does this all mean in the grand scheme of things?
I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought to mull over as you pack your bags for the convention. Look at the balance of the resolutions we just analyzed.
Look at the sheer volume of words.
If a church body spends 90% of its convention time, its legislative energy, and its institutional anxiety debating the exact boundaries of the pastoral office, who gets in, how they get in, what the bylaws say, the exact oversight mechanisms, are we spending enough time, energy, and financial resources actually funding and celebrating the proclamation of that office?
That is a staggering question. We are so busy building the fences that we forget to tend the garden.
How can you, as a local delegate, use your voice on the floor to help shift the culture of the institution from endless, anxious rulemaking to joyful, confident worker sending?
Because at the end of the day, all of this, the parliamentary procedures, the 100-page workbooks, the late-night huddles over coffee, the microphones, the voting devices, the bylaws, all of it exists for one singular, beautiful purpose.
Yes.
They exist so that the risen Christ can continue to feed his sheep with his word and his sacrament through faithful, well-formed, and deeply cared-for pastors.
We don't want the homeowners association to be so obsessed with the height of the fence that they forget about the family inside.
We want the family to thrive. We want the gospel preached. We want the kingdom
over castle.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. God's blessings on your preparation and your service as a delegate. We'll see you next time.